bullpups, a contentious type of rifle that seems to always spark debate. And among this class of weapon, there's one that seems to show up in many different games, even if it doesn't fit in. Of course, I'm talking about the Type 95. China has had a long storied history and a formidable military to match. And contrary to what some movies depict, the Chinese have never been adverse to adopting firearms and explosive weaponry. After all, the invention of gunpowder is generally attributed to Chinese alchemists. The development of firearms stems from a long history of weapons, and to understand their significance, it's important to look back at humanity's creations from the past. That's why this video is brought to you by the Hungry Minds. Their book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, is a detailed, illustrated encyclopedia of humanity's greatest inventions and discoveries. It covers a variety of topics, from optics, mechanisms, to my favorite, weapons. Each invention has a unique and detailed illustration combining engineering and medieval art styles, and each page is printed on a premium matte art paper. This is a high-quality book. But this is more than just a history and science guide. This is a book for the curious mind. Some of my favorite parts are, of course, from the military section. Check out how intricate and detailed these firearm illustrations are. All the little details you'd expect to see are present. But it's not just conventional technology. Check out this coil gun. Even with something so complicated, the illustration and description helped me understand how it would work. In concept, of course. With over 2.3 million raised on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and involving over 50 professionals in its creation, there is a wealth of knowledge and care behind this book. So don't wait to pick it up. Use the link in the description to purchase your copy of The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization today, and use my code CIVILIAN for 10% off. And thank you again to Hungry Minds for sponsoring this video. However, while China has had a long history of developing gunpowder-based weapons, they were less innovative when it came to firearms. There are many reasons that could explain this, but one significant factor that could be attributed to the slowdown of weapons development is, ironically, China's dominance in East Asia. China certainly has had its history of warfare, and with it, times of expedient weapons innovation. But once China had secured itself from foreign invasion, the country became isolated from larger conflicts for long periods of time. So, with ongoing relative peace, came a stagnation in weapons development. In contrast, European states began to see constant warfare, and thus, required the latest and greatest weapons. And as a result, firearms development in Europe pulled ahead significantly compared to China. By the beginning of the 20th century, firearms were being utilized in China, but indigenous designs were scarce. Throughout the first half of the 1900s, China heavily relied on foreign imports for small arms. Even when China did make their own firearms, they were usually based on pre-existing designs. One of these was the Type 56. Originally a licensed copy of the Soviet AKM, China would eventually implement their own small changes to the weapon to make it their own. But for all intents and purposes, it was functionally identical to the AKM. While the Chinese considered the Type 56 a formidable weapon, there was a desire to replace it with something more modern. After a failed attempt at modernizing the SKS, the rifle that eventually did replace the Type 56 was the Type 81. This was a weapon that took the best features of both the AK and SKS and combined them into a new platform. Featuring reliable rock-and-lock mags, a pistol grip and stock reminiscent of the AK, and a bolt hold-open function, the Type 81 proved to be effective at what it was designed for, firing 7.62x39 reliably and relatively accurately. The Type 81 was an effective weapon for its time, and still sees use by other countries to this day. But by the 1960s, there was a new bullet that would change everything: the 5.56x45 cartridge. The 5.56 round was a departure from most design philosophies of other bullets at the time. It was a round lighter than 7.62x39, and also more effective out to further distances. But perhaps most important was its light weight. Since being able to effectively suppress an enemy is key to winning a firefight, it was found that typically, the winning side was the one with more ammo, and a lighter cartridge meant that soldiers could carry more of that ammunition. So, other countries followed suit. NATO countries began adopting the 5.56 round, and Russia developed their own lightweight cartridge, the 5.45x39 round. Not to be outdone, China decided that they would develop their own version of a lightweight cartridge in 1971. After years of deliberation, it was decided that this would be the 5.8x42mm cartridge. By all accounts, it's very similar to both 5.56 and 5.45. It's small, lightweight, and travels at a high velocity. China claims that the 5.8 is superior to both the 5.56 and 5.45, though this has not been empirically tested. While the development of what would become the 5.8 cartridge commenced in 1971, China also assembled a team that would develop the gun that would fire this round at the same time. The Type 87, a redesigned variant of the Type 81 chambered in 5.8, saw some use, but ultimately was not selected. While the Type 81 and Type 87 were original Chinese designs, they borrowed heavily from pre-existing rifles. To the uninitiated, they even somewhat resembled the AK platform. And by this point, the Chinese wanted to move entirely away from existing firearms and design a rifle they could truly call their own. Eventually, they looked to a type of rifle that was quite unorthodox for the time, but was gaining traction in other countries: the bullpup. Generally speaking, a bullpup rifle is one in which the action sits behind the grip of the rifle, rather than in front of it, like on most conventional rifles. This presents a few key advantages. Most notably, the location of the action allows the barrel of the weapon to run through much of the rifle itself. This means that a bullpup rifle can have a long barrel while retaining an overall short length. A shorter weapon is easier to maneuver in close quarters, and also when entering and exiting vehicles. In regards to ballistic performance, a longer barrel is always better than a shorter one. The bullet will exit at higher velocity, making it easier to reach out to further targets. However, this does not necessarily make the rifle more accurate. Bullpups also come with other advantages. In many bullpup rifles, the weight is heavier at the rear. This makes the weapon easier to hold up for longer periods of time. It also makes the weapon easier to transition from target to target. However, it's not entirely clear why China became so fixated on a bullpup rifle. Some have theorized that the short length of a bullpup would allow soldiers to enter and exit vehicles easier, which would fit in conjunction with China's increasing usage of vehicles within their military at the time. Others simply say that the advantages of a bullpup rifle, that is, a long barrel in a short overall length, were features desirable by the PLA. Whatever the truth was, it was clear that the PLA wanted their bullpup rifle. There were a number of attempts to create a bullpup rifle for the Chinese military. However, while they had their advantages, none were chambered in the 5.8x42mm round. In 1989, the People's Liberation Army tasked Chinese firearms manufacturer Norinco with designing a new firearm. Rather than a singular design, it was to be a family of firearms that could be adapted for different purposes. And of course, It needed to fire the 5.8 by 42 round. The task was subcontracted to 2 different companies, who were given a mere 4 years to develop this new weapon family. The result was the QBZ-95, or Type 95. It was neither China's first rifle chambered in 5.8, nor was it the first bullpup created for the PLA, but it was the one that was chosen to be the PLA's standard rifle, first unveiled in 1997 during the handover of Hong Kong from the United Kingdom to China. It was a statement to the world. Gone were the ragtag peasant armies of the past. China wanted the world to know that they would be a force to be reckoned with. So, why was the Type 95 chosen? There were a number of factors that set it apart from previously fielded rifles. The QBZ-95's receiver is comprised primarily of polymer. This cuts down significantly on weight, making a light rifle even lighter. Like many semi-auto rifles, the Type 95 uses a short-stroke gas operating system. It was a proven reliable system and could be easily maintained. The rifle also came with a gas regulator, which could adjust the amount of gas going back into the rifle depending how dirty the weapon was, or cut it off completely for grenade launcher use. And similar to previous rifles used by the PLA, the Type 95 uses rock and lock magazines, perhaps somewhat slower than a straight insert, but more reliable in colder environments. The design of the rifle itself, while unique, appeared to also borrow from other pre-existing designs. The flash hider is certainly reminiscent of the M16 birdcage flash hider, and the enlarged carry handle with the charging handle underneath bears an uncanny resemblance to the FAMAS, another bullpup adopted by military and police. The Type 95 was first revealed to the world in 1997, and slowly began to replace the Type 81 as China's service rifle. But just as intended, the Type 95 was not limited to being just a rifle. It also came as a carbine and light machine gun. The carbine was issued to the Chinese Navy, Special Forces, and other elements who needed a short rifle, while the light machine gun was of course issued as a squad automatic weapon. Just as intended, the Type 95 platform had become a family of weapons, with different choices depending on different use cases. The Type 95 proved to be a good weapons platform. It saw extensive use within the PLA and in other countries as well. Interestingly, export variants chambered in 5.56x45 were sold to civilian markets in other countries, most notably Canada. However, while the Type 95 was a good weapon, there was certainly room for improvement. The controls on the rifle are awkward, to say the least. The position of the safety means that a shooter needs to remove their support hand and reach all the way to the back of the weapon to use it. And the lack of a bolt hold open and release means that a shooter needed to rack the charging handle to reload an empty weapon. So, an updated version of the Type 95 began development in the 2000s. Perhaps the most significant improvement this new version would bring would be to move the selector from the back to the front. Specifically, it was moved to the left side of the weapon on the pistol grip, allowing a shooter to manipulate the safety with their thumb. This is a much more ergonomically sound position for the selector, not unlike the one found on an AR-15. Additionally, this updated rifle also included a bolt hold open, meaning that when the rifle expended all ammunition, the bolt would be locked open. This makes for a visual indicator that the rifle is empty, and also makes for a slightly easier and faster reload. Beyond these two changes, there were also some other small but important improvements made to the Type 95. The ejection port was redesigned to eject brass at a more forward angle, which theoretically was more accommodating of left-handed shooters. The furniture was redesigned to heat up less during longer strings of fire, and a rail was added to the carry handle to allow the attachment of optics. This was a true improvement to the original Type 95 design, and made for a significantly better shooting experience for the operator. Dubbed the Type 95-1, this new and improved version would go into service in the early 2010s. Both the Type 95 and Type 95-1 have seen many years of service in the PLA, with some being still used to this day. So of course, both of them have showed up in many different games. The Type 95 has appeared in many games. Of course, in games where the PLA is depicted, it makes sense for the weapon to also show up. But a lot of the time, the Type 95 appears where the Chinese don't make an appearance at all. The reason for this is unclear. Perhaps this is an attempt by game companies to avoid offending China and maintain the gargantuan Chinese market. Or maybe it's simply game developers trying to include an interesting weapon in their games. In real life, the Type 95 is not a common battlefield pickup, but in games, it's often seen left behind by an unknown force for the player to use. Its performance in games is also mixed. The real weapon has a rate of fire of about 650 rounds per minute. While this is an ideal rate of fire for an assault rifle in real life, this is rather slow when translated to video games. Compared to weapons that fire 800, 900, or more rounds per minute, the Type 95 typically cannot compete, especially when most firefights in video games take place at close quarters. So generally, the Type 95 isn't a standout performer in games. But what about how it looks? How attractive the Type 95 is depends on who you ask. Some think it's reminiscent of a sci-fi era, while others think it's an ugly amalgamation of the most unergonomic rifles of the 20th century. But one thing's for sure, the Type 95 is certainly a very unique gun with a distinct silhouette. Perhaps it's for this reason that the Type 95 shows up in so many games. When a weapon looks interesting, it's a lot more fun to include it, even if its inclusion doesn't make sense. After all, looking cool is half the battle. It's odd to witness modern technology become a classic. What once was cutting edge become antiquated. The Type 95 was at the forefront of small arms development for its time. Constructed of polymer, firing a new round, and eventually capable of mounting attachments, it heralded a new era of rifles for China. And the significance of the Type 95 has certainly not been forgotten in games. The Type 95 has somewhat of a cult following, and within China, there is aftermarket support to bring the weapon fully into the modern world. But despite this, the Type 95 family is slowly being replaced in the PLA with the QBZ-191 family of weapons, a departure from bullpups back to a more conventional rifle design. But despite its inevitable replacement, the Type 95 remains a significant firearm in both real life and in games. Its adoption remains one of the most notable implementations of a bullpup rifle by a major superpower, and a testament to the effectiveness of that class of rifle. The Type 95 is an important footnote in firearm history, and proof that a bullpup can be done right.